Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Innal hamdalillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh wa na'udzu billahi min syururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina may yahdihillahu fala mudhillalah wa may yudlil fala hadiyalah. Wa asyhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la syarikalah wa asyhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluh. In the name of Allah, the most gracious and most merciful, we praise Him, we seek His help, we seek His forgiveness, and we seek the protection of Allah from the evils in our hearts and from the evil things that we might be tempted to do. He whom Allah has guided, none of us can lead him astray, but he whom Allah has led astray, none of us can lead him back to the right path. I bear witness that none has the right to be worshipped except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has no partners in our I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his slave and his messenger. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ فَقَدْ فَازَ فَوْزًا عَظِيمًا. O you truly believe, have taqwa to Allah as is his due, and do not die except in the state of Islam, which is a state of complete submission and surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. O mankind, have taqwa to Allah, who has created you from a single soul, that is Adam, peace be upon him, and from him Allah has created his wife. And from both of them, Allah has dispersed into many men and women. And have taqwa to Allah, in which we're using His name. You have made many requests and demands one another, and maintain the bonds of kinship. Indeed, Allah is ever over you an observer. O you truly believe, have taqwa to Allah, and speak always the truth. If you do so, Allah will direct you to the good righteous deeds, and He will forgive you of your sins. And whosoever obey Allah and His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would have achieved a great achievement that is being admitted into paradise. أما بعد فإن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. And to proceed on, the best of the speech is the speech of Allah, which is in the Quran. The best guidance is guidance of beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The worst thing in Islam is the introductions of new elements in faith, and every newly invented matter is an innovation. Every innovation is a misguidance, and every misguidance will lead us to the hellfire. As-salatu wassalamu ala khatamil anbiya al-mursalin Muhammadin sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And greetings of peace and blessings to the beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is last and final of all the prophets of Allah. Alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters in Islam, we are now at the third week of the month of Shawwal, and those of you who have still to continue to fast the 6 days of Shawwal, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for you. Those who have completed, alhamdulillah, may Allah accept all our deeds, and may Allah reward us for the full reward of the whole year of fasting. Ameen. Right? So, as you know, alhamdulillah, brothers and sisters in Islam, we are at this stage of the racism issues, and elements of racism has been scrutinized a lot, right? And of course, undoubtedly, as a few Muslims are participating in all these protests and all this, subhanallah, right? But we always have to take care of our own backyard first as Muslims, isn't it true? I remember when I first came into the UK, right? I mean, the topic for today is racism among Muslims. Does it exist, right? I remember when I first came to the UK, as you know, in the UK, most of the mosques are Asian mosques, isn't it true, right? Most of the mosques here, the Bangladeshi or Pakistanis, and a few big mosques are mixed, right? Like London Central Mosque are quite mixed, right? With a plethora of cultural or races of Muslims who would go there and worship Allah, right? And I remember, of course, I've come from Singapore, and I coming here. We are not used to pray in other mosques other than those of the Muslims in Singapore, which is usually equivalent to Malays, right? So when I came here, and I remembered praying in some mosque in East London, not East London Mosque, the other one in the Brick Lane, right? Even my local mosques. And of course, I mean, it's a sunnah for you and I, for the brothers I'm talking about, right, to pray in the first row, wasn't it true, right? So when I came early, of course, I sat in the first row, and I was looked strangely by some of these worshippers. Most of them are elderly ones at the front of the first row, right? I mean, implying that I don't belong there, right? Which is quite disturbing for me, right? Of course, brothers, the same thing as I'm not saying that this is prevalent, right? This is only to some people. Same thing as, I mean, on my side of the world, right? Most of us or Muslims are Malays. So, I mean, there is a little bit of, I wouldn't say racism, but a bit of prejudice against those who do not follow the they call it the madhab, yeah, of Shafi'i and all this, right? In this early days, now perhaps it's different. I haven't been. I mean, I only go back there for maybe a few times, once a year, and it may change now, right? So there is this, I would say, common misconception, right? Even though it's so different from what Islam stated, right? Well, the Islam belongs to our race, right? If you don't belong to a race, well, you're not that correct. You're quite deviated. Do you know what I mean, right? Just because that I don't wear the cap in the mosque and I pray, right? Just because that I am of a different color from those people, I mean, I would be perceived to be different. I mean, I think I'm talking about the early days. I think now as they get used to see me in the mosque all the time, they're used to it. But that shouldn't be the way, isn't it true? In the sense that, after all, we are living in London. We are living in a predominantly multicultural society in which, I mean, if you want to know what happened in Umrah and in Hajj, I mean, come to London, because a lot of Muslims here come from a whole different types of races and cultural practices and all this, right? So, yeah, so the first trip to London, or the first few months, and it's quite an eye opener for me that, well, you know, some Muslims are actually treating me differently and all this, which is not supposed to be the way. Okay, that's why some people are more comfortable in praying in like London Central Mosque or Regent's Park Mosque, right? In which there is a, for sure, right, more mixed in terms of races, right? Which I think, again, that shouldn't be the way, no matter where you pray. I mean, the concept of racism in Islam is completely unacceptable, right? So, how would I um, present this talk to you about, is there racism among Muslims, right? First of all, of course, I would like to say how Islam view racism itself, right? Is it allowed, not allowed, and all this? Are there any exceptions and all this, right? We actually we covered this about maybe about 4 or 5 months ago, right? But this is just to summarize what we discussed, right? Then I would tell you about my own personal experience, right? Through my journeys, through my clients. You have to remember that I am an immigration and human rights solicitor. I would meet clients, sadly, right, who were mistreated, right, by their employers. Well, some of them, some of my clients, they were domestic workers and all this, right? They were mistreated by their, hate to say this, the Muslim employers and all this. Alhamdulillah, they trust me enough to come to me and allow me to help them to resolve their issues and all this, right? And then we are going to talk about three different Sahaba who were non-Arabs. And I was quite blown away in the sense that I was thinking he is the epitome of um, non-racist, in the sense that Islam should be like this, right? But I have to remind you and I, right? It's not about, well, Islam must be shown to take black people on a high level. It's not like that, right? It's all about based on merits. If you are capable of doing this and you're good, beautiful voice, and based on that, that is why Muhammad SAW asked him to be the muadhin. It's not because to show people about, okay, Islam means, it must be equal and racism doesn't exist in Islam. That's why we should choose Bilal to be the um, muadhin, and that's not the case. I have to stress on this, right? It's not to show others, well, Islam is better. So I would choose this as it's all based on merit. If you are capable, if you are able to do this better than anybody else, then you should be chosen to do that. And it's very important to understand, right? But subhanallah, so I was trying to choose, who are the other two, right? And I chose, well, I have this select few names to choose from. And then, okay, Salman Al Farsi and then Suhaib Al Rumi. Just, I think that, I knew them enough to talk about them. In terms of, I've read enough. And subhanAllah, there's hadith based only on these three people of Prophet Muhammad, which, alhamdulillah, it fits what I was trying to project to everybody here, right? Regarding how Islam would go beyond bounds, right? To select people to be the, like, for example, the close companions of Prophet Muhammad, not based on their merit, right? And regardless of whether they're Arabs or non-Arabs. Okay, so let us now first talk about the how Allah informed us about the different people or different races that He has created. And of course, you and I know would come across this verse in Surah number 49, right? In verse number 13, right? Ya ayuhan nasu inna khalaqnakum min dzakarin wa untha wa ja'alnakum syu'uban wa qabaila lita'arafu. Inna akramakum 'indallahi atqakum. Yeah. O mankind, this is what Allah said. I've created you from a man and a woman, and I've made you into nations and tribes. And this is very important. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Those who are saying greetings and salam. That we are created to get to know one another, not to kill one another, not to discriminate with one another, to get to know one another. Not whether that's what Allah used ya yuhannas, yeah, in which addressing the whole of humanity, not just to the Muslims, right? Everybody is created differently, right? In fact, we know from hadith that, and I cut the long story short, right? Adam himself was created, was asked by angels, right? And he was eventually, the angel of death was able to take the soil from different parts of the earth, right? Of different colors. And therefore, eventually, from Allah's own hands, He created Adam alayhi salam. Okay. So this is the most important verse in terms of that we are created differently, yeah, from different nations and tribes. What is a function? Lita'arafu, right? To get to know one another. And the next part of this verse, Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum, right? Despite all this, everybody is equal in the eyes of Allah except those with taqwa, those who are God-fearing, those who are God-conscious, those who love Allah so much that they would always strive to please Allah, to obey His command. At the same time, they fear Allah so much that they would be the one who always prevent themselves from disobeying Allah. So this will exceed, or this will be the closest to Allah, right? The most honored by Allah are the ones with taqwa. Not because you're Arab, not because you're from Malaysia, not because you're from Sudan, not because that you are from Indonesia, right, or from America. It is based on the merit of taqwa, right? So this from the basis of who is the one who would be honored by Allah. Don't you want to be honored by Allah, brothers and sisters, right? We would be, is it an honor to be honored by Allah, isn't it true, right? And therefore, right, to earn this honor of Allah is not based on the race, it is based on taqwa, right? So this forms the first principle that we would understand, right? And of course, in the same surah 49, right? I think in verse number 10, yeah, innamal mu'minuna ikhwa, yeah, the believers are nothing else but brothers. Right? All of us, whether you're from China, from India, from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, and all this, everybody are brothers, right? And this is so important to have this. In fact, we know that in the hadith of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? He said we are not allowed to lie at all, are forbidden except three things, right? And one of them is to reconcile two brothers. And that shows the importance of this brotherhood despite of different races, right? That, things happen that you just happen not to like one another for whatever reasons, yeah. But if you want to patch up these two brothers or two sisters, right, then you're allowed to lie, right? And that shows the importance of this the ta'arafu, right? That you want that the reasons why we are so different. It is a beauty of it that we can get to know one another, right? Again, coming back to my story about when I was in Singapore, right? The Muslims are mainly the Malays, right? So you don't actually know the people from different countries or different cultures in general. Of course, there would be foreigners who come once in a while and all this to the local mosque, right? So it's only when you go to Umrah or to Hajj, and then you get this experience to meet people from all over the world. I mean, in a beautiful manner, how people are saying salam to each other and smiling and all this, alhamdulillah, right? So that's why for me, coming to London about I think it's almost about 20 years ago exactly, right? It is an eye opener that we are exposed to different cultures and different people, right? And those who are always going to Central Mosque, you would know, right? How next to you will be say a person from, let's say, Egypt, next to you a person from from Sudan, from Somalia, and all this, right? In one row about 50 people, we can have, at least 10 or 20 different races, and this is the beauty of Islam in London, alhamdulillah. Okay. Now, in Surah number 30, right, Ar-Rum, yeah, in verse number 22, Allah informed us, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ خَلْقُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَاخْتِلَافُ أَلْسِنَتِكُمْ وَأَلْوَانِكُمْ إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَاتٍ لِلْعَالِمِينَ. Right? And among his signs is the creations of the heavens and the earth, and the difference of your languages and colors. Verily, in that are indeed signs for men of sound knowledge. And we make dua that we are among this world of sound knowledge, is what Allah said. That we have to acknowledge people of different colors, right? Different languages, in order for us to live together, right? There's no difference between in terms of our relationship with Allah, except as Allah said in Surah number 14, verse number 30, except for piety, for taqwa. Okay, so Allah already set up this, I should say, principle, right, of how He created you and I of different colors, right? And it is for the Arab to get to know one another. Okay, now we should also understand, right? For example, in the part of time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he migrated to did the hijrah, right, from Mecca to Medina, and in Medina, subhanallah, right, and we have discussed this on a few times in our lessons. What did he say as his first speech to the people, right? Ya ayuhan nas, afshu salam wa at'imu ta'am wasilul arham wasallu bil laili wan nasu niyam tadkhulul jannata bisalam. Right? All people, the first thing, right, to address to everybody, spread salam. Right? Whether you are from this part, this tribe, or that tribe, and all this, right? You spread salam, right? Feed the hungry, maintain your kin relationships, right? And pray at night when others are sleeping. And as a result of this, inshallah, right? With this, you shall enter paradise in peace. And look at this, right? This is even before the last sermon, right? How Prophet Muhammad SAW, right, as the best person on the earth ever, right, it was advising those people in Medina, right, to spread salam fast and feed the poor, because when you feed the poor, inshallah, is how you gain trust and friendship and brotherhood, isn't it true? Right? And then after that, maintain ties of kinship, right? And pray when others are sleeping. And this is very important guideline, not just for them in Medina, but for us, you and I, inshallah. Okay. Um, and of course, right, the epic um, last sermon of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? And I'm just going to read for you in English, right? All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over black, nor does a black have any superiority over a white, except by piety and good action. Learn that every Muslim is a brother to every Muslim, and that the Muslims constitute one brotherhood. Nothing shall be legitimate to a Muslim which belongs to a fellow Muslim unless it was given freely and willingly. Do not therefore do injustice to yourself. So at the end of the day, it's all about justice, right? That's what Islam stands for, and that's what brothers and sisters, that's what we expect from Allah, isn't it true? On the day of judgment, um, well, whatever things that we did, right, mistakes, sins, and all this, we still want justice. And you know that Allah will, with His rahmah, forgiveness, yeah, we expect Him to forgive us, right? And that is quite important for all of us to try and understand, right, about this, right? If we want justice from Allah, then we should practice justice to others. So it's all about justice, to treat each other well and all this. I mean, an example. Now, I'm not trying to say everybody is the same, of course, right? I'm just saying in general, from my observance of living in London, for example, right? It is difficult, right, for, let's say, a Bangladeshi Muslim sister to marry Pakistani brother. In general, of course, I'm sure there's many exceptions, but there's quite a lot of difficulties, and they would face, problems with the family members about questioning and this, as it is, right? Some people of my students, right, who come to me and ask for advice, they do face difficulties, especially for reverts who want to marry another particular family of particular culture and all this, right? Forgetting that what Prophet Muhammad SAW has advised us, right? When you look for a spouse, right? A woman, for example, in the hadith, right? I'm just being very liberal in my interpretation of the hadith, right? A woman is chosen for four things, right? The lineage, the wealth, the beauty, and the deen. And who does not choose the deen will be a loser, right? Hadith is very clear. Everybody knows this. And yet everybody, or the parents especially, has these other ideas, right, about choosing the spouse for your children. And this is completely un-Islamic, isn't it true? Right? No doubt, right? You may, I think, I shouldn't say understandably, but I'm trying to understand, right? In allowing your child or your daughter or son to marry such a person from another race, or you may face a backlash from your other family members, or from other people from your society or from your race, whatever it is, right? And subhanallah, right? A lot of people fear this backlash more than they fear Allah. And this completely, we have to eliminate this racism within the Muslim community itself, right? So this is that we have to try and make this a point, right? That we have to take this issue very seriously, right? I've always used this verse, right? When people take the cultures of the family members as more important than Allah, right? Allah informed us in Surah number 9 in verse number 24, right? In the meaning, and you have heard this before. I said this many times, right? 9:24. Say if your fathers, your sons, your brothers, your wives, your kindred, the wealth that you have gained, the commerce in which you fear a decline, and the dwellings in which you delight are dearer to you than Allah and His Messenger, and striving hard in His cause, then wait until Allah brings about His decision or His torment. And Allah do not get the people who are al-fasiqun. We talked about yesterday about fasiq, right? Those who are rebellious, you know about the truth, and yet you are going on a different path, right? So this is something in which we have to resolve this, among our own cultures, about intermarrying people from different cultures and all this, right? And this is one of the most, for me, disturbing things, that you don't allow your children, right, to marry people from other cultures, right? Which is completely against what we have talked about in the Hadith and in the Quran, right? And listen to this, right? Umar ibn Umar anhu related that Prophet Muhammad said, I saw in my dream, and this is quite beautiful, right? I saw in my dream many black sheep gathering among the white ones. The companions asked, what is the interpretation of this dream, O Prophet of Allah? He said, non-Arabs will share your deen and your lineage, right? The companions were quite shocked. What? The non-Arabs, the Prophet ﷺ said, if the iman of faith was tied to the star, it would have been claimed by men from the non-Arabs, from Hakim, reported by Hakim, right? So if faith was tied to a star, it would have been claimed by men from the non-Arabs. Alhamdulillah of this hadith, right? Because as Islam spread to many regions, right? How people practice Islam is quite remarkable in different regions. And I'm not saying this because I'm from the other side, right? From the Malaysian, Indonesians, all this. If you were to ask, if you have been to Umrah before, right? If you have been to Hajj, or if you have talked to people who have been to Umrah and Hajj, they would always say, and this is about 99% people will say, oh, I love when I met people from Indonesia, from Malaysia, right? They're so nice, they're so united, right? They're so polite, and all is alhamdulillah, right? From this side of the world. Of course, we have a lot of faults. I'm not going to say that for now, right? You know what I had in mind, right? But in terms of akhlaq, characters, personality, right? That side of the world, right? It has always been praised, not by me, right? But for those people who have met them before in Hajj or Umrah, right? And alhamdulillah, right? This is in a sense that they would see a lot of how the akhlaq of a Muslim is supposed to be. And even among the non-Muslims, that the way they speak, the way they behave, and all this. Okay. Now, so these were about the hadith. What about the experience of the early Islam, right? Now, ponder over these issues, right? In the conquest of Mecca, right, when the Muslims, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the companions migrated to Medina. I think they were for about 8 years or 10 years, right? And then they went back to Mecca to conquer it again, right? As you know, before that, it was full of idols and all this. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, after the conquest of Mecca, who was the first people who entered the Kaaba? Two of them, right? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Three of them, right? Bilal bin Rabah, we'll talk about later, Bilal, and Zaid ibn Haritha, a former slave. And these three entered the Kaaba first. and then followed by the Quraysh. Because you would think that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he would chose the Quraysh first because they were the former people who were living there. No, he chose Bilal and Zaid ibn Thabit, right? Sorry, Zaid ibn Haritha, right, to enter the Kaaba first. And both of them has completely, in a sense, that no, what do you call it? They were poor, they were slaves, and all this, right? So again, based on merit, okay. And then the Quraysh called Abdullah ibn Umar entered. Okay, so this victory itself, okay, also emphasized about the importance of there is no racism in Islam. Okay, now there was in a time of, I think it was Umar ibn Khattab, right, when he was a caliph, right, the leader of the in Egypt, right, when Muslims conquered Egypt, right, they appointed a black leader, right. I think his name was Ubaidah ibn Thamid, right, and he was a leader, and so he went to meet the leader of the Christians, right, in order to to resolve things, to discuss things, and all this. And he was met with a person called Muqawqis, the leader of the Egypt, the Christian leader of the Egypt, right? On seeing a black person coming to him, he said, "I'm not going to deal with him again," right? I'm sure in the teachings of Isa alayhi salam, I'm sure, very sure, right? This is not the case. So again, right, those people who claim to be Christians, right? Again, I do not know how much the teachings or the books has been changed until to this stage that this person has all these ideas, yeah, about not dealing with a black leader, right? And he refused to deal with him, with this Ubaidah, anhu, right? Um, but the Sahaba would not deal with any of this nonsense, right? Because he was appointed on the basis of, again, his merit, right? Because of his good judgment, about his leadership, and therefore he was appointed as a leader, right? So Muqawqis has got no option but to deal with Ubaidah ibn Thamid anhu, yeah, in order to discuss things further when the Muslims conquered Egypt. Okay, so even at the conquest of Jerusalem, and you know about this beautiful story, it's always been repeated again and again and again, right? How at first it was with Umar ibn Khattab, wasn't it true, right? When he was traveling, I think it was on a horse or a donkey, right, with a slave. So they keep on changing places. At one time, the slave was on the animal, Umar was walking, and another time when Umar got tired, Umar was on a donkey, and all that. And this shows truly how Islam's supposed to be. It's not. I can guarantee you today in today's world, right, with people. I'm going to talk about all the domestic workers and all this. For sure, right? If this were to be 2020, right? If you have a rich employee and all this, as if the employee going to walk, right? I'm sure the one who is walking will always be the domestic worker or the employee. And this, right? So when they entered Jerusalem in humility, right? They thought that the one that was on the animal, right, was a slave. They thought he was the caliph, and and they were so shocked he wasn't. And this clearly shows how just Islam is, to treat individuals as individuals, not in terms of race or superiority. Okay, and in when the time went on, right, the Crusaders, if you do not know this, right, they were the Christians, and they killed about at least 200,000 people died. The civilians died, innocent civilians died, right? There was a lot of oppressions, right? And it's only Salahuddin, yeah, Ayubi, yeah, who liberated Jerusalem in 1187, right? There was a lot of justice, right? In fact, there was an issue in which there was the Christian group, and there was a lot of fight, of course, right? So there was one incident in which there was a married person, Christians were getting married, but they couldn't get married because of this war and all this. And Salahuddin, yeah, stopped the war for the moment so that this couple can get married, and they were Christians, right? So all this clearly showed how much different, right? The Muslims in the early days knew about racism, respecting others despite the differences in color, in language, right? In languages and all this. Okay. So this would be how you and I, right? How we should emulate these characters, how we should ensure we follow the teachings of Prophet Muhammad SAW, right? Of the early generations of Muslims, right? And of course, from Allah Himself, how we should try to eliminate racism among ourselves, right? But what is actually the true picture about racism among the Muslims, right? I'm going to tell you from my experience, of course, and from the, of course, newspaper reportings and all this, right? And I'm going to tell you about the Muslims, of course. With non-Muslims, well, I don't expect much, isn't it true? Well, even though we're not supposed to have racism, but I don't expect much. For example, right, when I was in Singapore, some of you may know this, right? I was on the line, I was in a queue in one of the supermarkets. Suddenly, somebody in front of me, Chinese, said it, looking at me in a very horrible, disgusting way, saying that you should go back to your own village, right? So I was okay, fine, right? Even in London, I think if you remember about maybe 2 years ago, this black woman in front of me was looking at me, and then, where are you from, right? In a very degrading manner and all this, right? But I wouldn't expect much from those for the non-Muslims, right? But with the Muslims, I would expect more, right? I'm sure, but I'm not trying to generalize the Muslims all the same, of course, but this is true what I read, my own experience, and what I see. There might be a systemic form of racism, but the people might be different, of course, right? So, for example, right, I knew this and I saw this in front of my own eyes. An application form, right, to work in Saudi Arabia with the salary scale of how much, for example, a medical person or nurse would earn, right? If you were to apply to work in Saudi Arabia, for example, right? Very blatantly, right? Americans at the top end would earn, for example, I'm just saying, yeah, for example, 4,000 pounds. British, slightly less. And all this in according to race, exactly the same position. Filipinos, Indians is all at the bottom. Salary scale is so much different. What does racism means? Racism means that a person is picked on or discriminated only based on color. And this happened in the land where Islam originated. I mean, how embarrassing it is. Even if this were to be in UK, and sadly, it's sad to see, right? Alhamdulillah, right? That's why some people, when they would comment, wow, I went to this country in the West, right? I see not much Muslims, but I see a lot of Islam. But I went to this Muslim country, I won't mention the names, right? I see many Muslims, but no Islam. It's quite true, isn't it true? Based on this itself, right? And where is this justice? Because without Islam, one of the reasons, if you read the early history, right, historical facts, how fast Islam spread, one of the main reasons is about justice. Justice, right? That is quite important for, very important, in fact, in Islam, justice, right? And for a country, especially like in Middle East countries, who knows Arabic language as a first language, to practice this itself is so, for me, right? It's so unacceptable. It's so embarrassing, and they should be ashamed of themselves. Being very blatant, black and white, to show the salary scale. Even back in the days when I was a dental surgeon, I remembered a British dentist who was black, and she herself made the same complaint. Well, being this color to work in this country, it is quite difficult, right? In terms of the treatment that she received and all this. Even for me myself, right? I used to bring reverts or some of my students to Saudi Arabia for Umrah, in the month of Ramadan, right? So I think we went about 3 times or 4 times to Saudi Arabia for Umrah, right? Alhamdulillah. And when we were sitting down, I was quite proud of it, right? Sitting down in front of the Kaaba, right? And people would talk to each other, whom we do not know, talk to each other. When they saw us, everybody was so impressed. Because we're from different colors, black, white, and and they were so impressed. How do we got to know each other? And alhamdulillah, we told them about the stories. But sadly, right? I mean, in the initial story, it's quite nice, but I noticed, right, that the white reverts got more preferential treatment from these people who ask questions and all this. Oh, how do you become Muslim? Whereas I saw it from my own eyes, right? Some of my river students, they were Philippines and all this. No attention at all given to them, right? They were more interested in whites becoming Muslims and all this. And this itself, right, shows how ignorant the people were, right, or are about racism in Islam. Okay. Now, things happen, for example, like this is, of course, I read it from. So this is the first example. In the media, right? I think it was in one of those main medias in UK, right? They show, for example, in the Gulf countries and the cities and all this, right? The people are traveling, or the workers are traveling in different carriages from the same train, but different compartments from the locals. I mean, how blatant racist are these, right? And we talked also, and you have read news about, for example, when Qatar had the won the bid for the World Cup 2022, right? Immediately they started to build stadiums, and how many people died, foreigners and all this, and they were their living conditions, and it's got horrible, right? And again, right? Yes, but partly to do with poverty and all this, but it's how the rich people who knew the Arabic language much more than you and I are treating those people is quite very shameful, right? How people lacked medical treatment and a lot of things, a lot of welfare they were lacking, right? Um, for example, also in this COVID-19 pandemic, right? A lot of people are losing jobs in all these, again, in the Middle Eastern countries, right? In Dubai and all these places, in Qatar, and Emirates, and all these countries, right? People are actually losing jobs, right? I'm talking about the migrants who came in these industries, and a lot of them, subhanallah, our Muslim brothers and sisters, some of them, of course, right? that they actually had all these they took loans in order to come to this country of few thousand pounds and all this, right? And on the basis they got no jobs, they faced more trouble, right? They fear of the loan sharks and all this, right? But among the Muslim people who were supposed to be in charge of the welfare, completely oblivious to the problems, right? Some of them from Sri Lanka and all this, right? And it was reported, for example, in the Guardian and in the even Amnesty, yeah, how these migrant workers were abused, right? And this is for me again sign of discrimination, isn't it, or a sign of racism and all this. Stark example of how injustice prevailed, right? Embarrassingly, in Muslim countries, right? Um, and as I said, right, as a human rights solicitor and as an immigration solicitor, I did encounter, right, quite a number. I'm not talking about one or two, quite a number of domestic workers, right, who were mistreated by the employers, and most of the employers are the Arabs, right? Um, Mistreatment includes working from morning 5 o'clock in the morning, right, all the way until like even 12 midnight, taking care of so many children. Not some of them are not even paid, right? Food eating, they ate food only from leftovers, right? Um, a lot of horror stories, and I heard it, and it's quite embarrassing for me because I always classify myself as a Muslim more than my own race or where I come from, right? Muslim, right? So when you hear a Muslim family mistreating or abusing, right, some of these women, and for me, if I felt in the heart that that is not right, it's not Islam at all, and alhamdulillah, they still come to me, even though they know my name is Muhammad Hilal Abu Bakr, they know I'm a Muslim. But quite surprising, they come to me because I thought they would go to somebody else, but they come to me for all these problems, and they would run away. So when the employer was in the hotel and all this, they run away from the employer. I'm not talking about one or two. Quite a number of people will run away when in the UK, right? And even when I was on holiday in Malaysia and all this, right? Nowadays, Malaysia becomes a tourist destination, one of the top tourist destinations for those Middle Eastern people when they came to Malaysia, right? A lot of complaints because I love to talk to taxi drivers. Whenever I go around, I love to talk to taxi drivers because if you want to know the real story of the locals and what happened locally, always talk to taxi drivers. They know everything, right? Yeah, they were always complaining about how the Arabs, right? How when they came to Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur, they were mistreating them. They think that they are still in Saudi Arabia where everybody else would be second-class citizens, and they were the best. They were more superior. And I heard it in front of my own ear, right? Lastly, of course, in terms of my own personal experience, some of you must have heard it, right? How I had horrible experience in Morocco, right? And I'm sure some people are maybe quite alarmed, and they would say, "Well, you shouldn't go do this." But it doesn't matter where I go, isn't where I went, isn't it true? Because of course I went to Casablanca and I went to Marrakesh and all this, right? Um, I went there alone, right? Wherever I went, right? I would always be mocked at. They thought I was Chinese, and then they would imitate me. They would just stand up and making a funny monkey noises at me and all this. And that, brothers and sisters, is not but one or two people which I can just dismiss. It's a whole bunch of them wherever I went. And I mean, how shameful, it is to have this racism among a Muslim country. I was quite excited. Oh, a Muslim country. I want to see how the Muslims were. I went to the mosque, big mosque in Casablanca and all this. But it's so, I mean, to such an extent, right? I think I had a holiday for about 1 week, right? I was quite close to my dad because I didn't know many people then. I just came to London, right? I think it was my first holiday to Morocco, right? So on the second night, I couldn't wait to go home, and I had about 5 days left. I remember, and every night, right, I had to reach my hotel before 6 or 7 for safety reasons. I was actually fearful for my life, and it's quite tiring to see how people were mocking me and all the time in Morocco, in Casablanca, and in Marrakesh. Um, and I remembered also, of course, calling, and I was the only people that I know were my dental nurses, complaining to them, I had these issues. I can't wait to leave this country and all this, right? So, in order to answer this main topic, are there racism among Muslims? My own experience, sadly, yes, there's a lot to be done. So don't assume, or in the sense that do not be so heavily involved in the Black Lives Matter when in the Muslims themselves, we need to take care of ourselves. Don't think that, oh, this is the very important thing. But among Muslims, we have to resolve among ourselves. Remember, we are Muslim first. Then, well, your own race comes second or third and all this, right? Muslims, Islam must almost come first. Okay? So this is how I, in a sense, that how the Muslims behave. It is far, far from what is expected from Allah, right? Far away from what has been taught to us by Prophet Muhammad SAW, and far away from, or far different from what has been practiced by the companions. Okay? So this is something for us to reflect, right? It is a disease in which we have to eliminate it. We have to talk about it, right? That the racism too does exist among the Muslims, right? In which, okay, I always remember when I say Muslims know about Islam, right? Muslims are like this, Islam is this. Yet we always try to reach up high, but there's quite a lot of difference, right, among how Muslims are behaving and how Islam is supposed to be. Okay, so this is the second part about our discussion about racism among Muslims, right? So the first part was how Islam teaches us to eliminate racism. Second part, that no matter what was taught to us, 2020, it is still in existence, right? So something in which we have to, it is up to you and me, inshallah, isn't it true, right? To raise this topic, to discuss among each other, and to raise this awareness, right, of how we must eliminate, alhamdulillah, right, brothers and sisters, in STEPS2ALLAH, right, in our group itself, right, you can see, alhamdulillah, as far as I'm concerned, right, we treat each other very well, right? There's no difference whether you're black, whether you're white, right? You still get the same intention. For example, from me, when I teach you individually in your Iqra lessons and all this, there's no difference at all. Whether I would call you or not call you, everybody is treated the same, alhamdulillah. Okay? Now, so let us look at the 3 examples of non-Arabs, right, who were the companions of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And as I said, subhanAllah, I was so grateful to Allah that the people that I chose, the 3 people that I chose to talk about, they were the same 3 people that were in hadith of Anas ibn Malik, who narrated that Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam spoke about 4 front runners, in Islam. He, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, said, I am the front runner of the Arabs. Suhaib is a front runner of the Romans. Bilal is a front runner of the Habasha, and Salman is a front runner of Persia. right? So the people that I chose to talk about subhanAllah are in this hadith, which I didn't know about this hadith until I was preparing for this. So in fact, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was trying to say, well, Islam, or predicted Islam, will spread in all these four regions of the world, right? In Asia, in Africa, in Europe, and of course in the Arabian Peninsula, right? So it was, of course, a great honor bestowed by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, on these foreigners who accepted Islam in the early days of Islam. Okay, now first let us talk about this most famous. I think for me, it's one of the most famous Sahaba. Even when I was small, and I'm sure when you were small, right? This, when you attended madrasa, you know about his story, yeah, about Bilal ibn Rabah, anhu, right, who was one of the closest and one of the earliest people to accept Islam. So whenever we talk about racism in Islam, of course, the first thing we talk about was this Bilal anhu, right? And in which both of his parents were also slaves, right? Rabah and Hamama, right? And Bilal too served as a slave to a woman close to this person called Umayyah ibn Khalaf, who was a staunch enemy of Islam, right? So even though he was, right, as a freed slave, right, even though he had a modest lineage and the position, right, of a slave, it did not stop him from becoming one of the greatest Sahaba. In fact, we know from hadith, right, not just a Sahaba, that he was um, in I wouldn't say predicted, right? Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam heard the voice of his footsteps in paradise, isn't it true, right? It was during the Isra Mi'raj, right, when he was sallallahu alaihi wasallam was after he met Allah, right, and after he was being commanded to um, the prayer was reduced from 50 to 5, and he heard these footsteps in paradise, wasn't it true, right? um, and he asked Jibril, right, who who belongs to this footstep? That means in the future, this person will be in Jannah. That was a prediction of the future. And Jibril said, that is your companion, Bilal, right? And then he went down, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? When he went back to Bilal, he asked this interesting question, right? The question that was asked to Bilal, right, was hold on, yeah. Yes. So okay, so he went back to Mecca, right? And the whole story we know about how he told the people about the prayers, right? And then he went to Bilal and said, tell me about the most hopeful act. That means the one which you deem the most rewarding with Allah, right? That you have done, right? Since your acceptance of Islam, because I heard your footsteps in Jannah. So what do you do? Of all the people, I only heard your footsteps. Right? What is this hopeful act that you did? And Bilal anhu, he answered, I do not consider any act more hopeful than whenever I make wudu, right, in an hour of night or day, I would immediately perform salah for as long as was destined for me to perform. It's hadith by Bukhari Muslim, right? That means, I think I take it this way, right? This is how I interpret it to be, right? The fact that Bilal, for him, right, was able to do wudu, right? That means Allah has invited him to do prayer, right? In order to thank Allah for being invited to pray, right, he would do 2 raka'ah after the wudu. Now, this was not done by Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. As far as we know, it was done by Bilal. And from hadith means not just what the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did, but what the Sahaba did. And Prophet Muhammad never said, no, I didn't do this. He didn't say that. He just leave it as it is. And therefore, this becomes an accepted hadith. That subhanAllah, if you and I were to do this, right, inshallah, you would be in paradise, isn't it true? According to this hadith. And inshallah, of course, whenever we do anything, Bilal will get all the rewards. Can you imagine, subhanAllah, he got all the rewards of the Muslim ummah of doing 2 raka'ah after wudu, right? So it is a way of thanking Allah. Because whenever you do 2 raka'ah, it's a way to thank Allah, isn't it true, right? For allowing or inviting you another chance to pray. Right? Same thing as when we go to the mosque to do the Tahiyatul Masjid, right? Why do we do this 2 raka'ah of Tahiyatul Masjid? Right? People say, oh, it's to greet the mosque. I mean, not actually, but it's a form of thanks and gratefulness to Allah, isn't it true? That of all the people in the world, you are invited to come to the mosque, to house of Allah, to worship Him. And as a form of thanks, right, you pray 2 raka'ah of Tahiyatul Masjid. Okay? So this is one of the main things of how Bilal was elevated to that level of that he was promised Jannah. Right? Give me one moment, please, brothers and sisters. Yeah. Sorry, it's a delivery. Okay. Now, so let us continue with story of Bilal, right? As one of the famous ones. So, belonging to parents who were both slaves. Of course, it's not easy, but so there's always this, the talk of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right, preaching about this so-called new religion, right, which is different from the ancestral religions of idol worshippings, right? And the people in Mecca was talking about it, and this is quite strange, right? Because the Quraysh, they had a lot of admirations for him, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right, on base of his honesty, that he was, he's called Al-Amin anyway, right? That he never spoke the truth, he never did magic and all this. And yet, on this basis of oneness of God, right, the rich Quraysh, they rejected that completely on the basis of, well, this so different from the teachings of the ancestors, right? And they have this allegiance to the religion of the ancestors, right? They fear, right, because of this equality and all this, their status will be lowered, right? And of course, right, there is this envy towards the tribe of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, was Bani Hashim, right? Was a noble tribe that there was supposed to be a prophet to rise from Bani Hashim. So there was a lot of what do you call it? They twisted a lot of words in order for people not to join the religion of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? And of course, eventually Bilal, anhu, he became Muslim, and as a slave, as a Muslim, right? For the masters, right? He brought disgrace to the whole family, and therefore, he was punished a lot. And the most famous punishment, as you know, right, was he was being almost naked, lying on the ground under the hot sun, and the big boulder was brought onto his chest, right? And he still say ahad, one, right? One, ahad. He refused to renounce Islam, right? And this is the most epic story, isn't it true? I mean, if you and I were to be in that position, how would we react? We might be different, right? And brothers and sisters, you're talking about Saudi Arabia. I remembered when I went to my Umrah the first time, right? It was 1999. about 40, 50 degrees, right? In those days, there were not big hotels like now in Mecca, right? I stayed in hotel. I still remember the name of hotel. It was called Mecca Hotel, right? Just if I were to throw the stones from the door of the hotel, throw the stones, it reached the door of the Masjid al-Haram because the hotels were so close surrounding the Masjid al-Haram, right? So I remember that slippers continuously get lost, right? So somebody took my slippers and all this. So I thought, okay, well, it's only if I were to run barefooted in the hot sun, of course, right? From my place, from the door of the mosque to my hotel is only about a few seconds, right? No problem, inshallah, right? Subhanallah, just a few seconds of walk, my whole leg became blisters. What about this punishment under the hot sun, right? Big hot boulders on the body and all this, right? So, but Bilal anhu, of course, he remained steadfast, and eventually the one who freed him was Abu Bakr anhu, right? And Abu Bakr bought him and freed him, and immediately the bond was very close with Abu Bakr and Bilal anhum, right? And this is the one in which they were saying, right, something like, well, if nobody wanted to buy him, well, we will reduce the price to what ounce of gold, then you can buy him, right? And Abu Bakr was saying, even if you to increase the price to 100 ounces of gold, I will still buy him, right? Subhanallah. So this shows in a sense that a lot of Sahaba, they were trying to free the slaves, especially when they're Muslims, right? They were trying to emancipate them, give them freedom, so that they're able to, to lead a normal life. Yeah, not as a slave. Okay. Now, so we know also from the story in which Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam chose Bilal anhu to do the adhan, right? Not again, don't get confused, right? Not because he's black, that's why they want to show equality, racism, he was chosen to. It's not because of that, it's because of merit. Bilal or anhu, he has a beautiful melodious voice, right? So if you know the hadith of adhan, right, the adhan started on the basis of a dream of the Sahaba. I think the Sahaba name was Abdullah bin Ziyad or anhu, right? Had a dream of how the adhan supposed to be as today, right? So when he woke up, he told Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam about this dream, and he Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, instead of doing the adhan himself, and this is quite noble of Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, our Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, isn't it true, right? Anybody else would say, "Oh, I'll do myself because I'm the Prophet," but he did not. He appointed the best person with the most beautiful voice, again based on merit, to do so. And Bilal was appointed to do the first adhan, right, in Medina. And upon hearing this, the adhan, to call the people to pray, Umar ibn Khattab anhu rushed also to say, hey, I got the same dream, exactly the same, right? And therefore it confirmed, right, that the adhan itself, it came from Allah, right? The exact words and all this, right? Now, and also when Mecca was conquered back, right, I think about 8 years or 10 years after Hijrah, right, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam also appointed, Bilal to do the adhan, from Mecca. And as I said just now earlier in the story, Bilal was one of the first one who entered the Kaaba door, the Kaaba itself. Okay. Now, so these were the stories of Bilal, right? And he also took part in all the battles: Battle of Badr, Battle of Uhud, battle in the main battles in Medina, Battle of Khandaq, the trench, right? And during the Battle of Badr, he killed his master. Subhanallah, right? He killed his master, and he was among they call it as Ashab Sufa, As-Sufa, this is area at the back of the mosque, right? Of the Prophet's mosque, in which the Sahaba with no homes and all this, they would stay there, right? And they would gain a lot of knowledge, right? That's why Bilal was able to um, transmit some of the hadith, I think, right? From Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, right? And he studied religion. So the Ashab as-Sufa, right? They were quite, if you read Google to read, it's quite a noble group of people, right, who lived there, and they began to seek knowledge from Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself. Okay. Now, so, and the cut long the story short is that when Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam passed away, right, Bilal was so sad that he refused to do the adhan anymore, and he sought permission from, I think, Abu Bakr anhu to move to Syria, right? To move to Syria, and in which he lived there, right? And I think only once or twice did he did the adhan. I think that was only on the request when Umar ibn Khattab was the caliph, right? He requested to do adhan. Everybody was crying because whenever he did the adhan, it reminded them of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so this is a story of Bilal radhanhu. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to allow you and me to meet him, inshallah. Yeah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue would allow you and I to meet him in Jannah, Jannatul Firdaus, right? Where we can meet the first slave who embraced Islam, right? Now, the second story of a non-Arab who were the first companions of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the first companions, right, or who was a prominent companion of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, was this Salman al-Farsi, right? Salman al-Farsi, right, was a Persian, right? So his father was a chief of the village, and he was the richest person, right? So in order to, and they were the Zoroastrians, so they were worshipping fire, right? So in order to preserve this religion and to protect the family and all this, he was almost locked up for quite a long time in the house. Yeah, Salman al-Farsi was locked up, right? Because he doesn't want to. The father didn't want him to get influenced by the society because they were very rich, right? It was when he got older that father asked him to take care of some business for him. But instead of going to this taking care of the business, he went to this church and he found another religion, which is Christianity, which was for him more amazing than the Zoroastrian, right? So he sought knowledge from all this, from the priest and all this. And when he came back to the father and told him about the religion better than their own religion of Zoroastrian, right? The father was quite upset and locked him up, actually, right? And he wasn't able to move out of the house at all, right? And he was chained to the feet and he couldn't get out, right? And he finally was able to release himself, and he went back to the church, and he ran away, and he went to the church, and he spent a lot of time in the church. And the bishop was very corrupt, and he found that the bishop kept a lot of money to himself, while claimed to, pay me money and I will make prayer for you. And all the money is not for the poor, it's to keep himself, right? And he was quite deluded about this religion, so-called religion, that was, that how can the bishop, who was supposed to be the man of God, try to keep the money for himself, right? So then he met these Arab leaders, right? Because he had a conversation, yeah, that there was the appearance of a new prophet in the land of the Arabs, right? So he wanted to know who it was, right? And he made a deal with this a group of Arab leaders from the Celt tribe, right? Give them the money in order for him to be brought to the prophet, right? But they did not bring him to Saudi Arabia. They sold him, in fact, yeah, to a Jewish family as a slave, right? And eventually, right, he worked for this servant in Medina, in the tribe. Remember, we talked before about the tribes in Medina, were Jewish tribes, is called Banu Qurayza, one of the tribes, right? and he was taken then to Medina, right? So that was the time when Prophet Muhammad SAW invited people to Islam, right? Again, he heard about Prophet Muhammad SAW, and he was informed there was this person called Muhammad, right? He's a prophet, and he would never accept any sadaqah, because the prophets and the families of prophets, right? They can never accept sadaqah, right, or charity, right? So he tested the prophet, right? He brought these what do you call it, dates, and said, "No, this is for you, right? The dates of all the people. I think you deserve it a lot." And he saw the Prophet Muhammad SAW did not accept the dates and distributed the dates to the companions, right? And he was looking for the sons of the Prophet. Remember, the Christians, right? In early days, they know what is the sons of the Prophet by looking at the back. There's a son of the Prophet, and Muhammad SAW know he was looking, and he lowered the cloak and saw the signs of the Prophet at the back. And immediately, right, he took his shahada, right? And Muhammad SAW after that was trying to emancipate him. That means try to free him as a slave. What was the price of his freedom? I think planting of 300 date palm trees and about 1,600 silver coins, which was quite a lot. And Muhammad SAW was raising money from the Sahaba to free him. And subhanAllah, this is, brothers and sisters, this is something about Islam, right? Because we are supposed to be like one body. If anybody is in trouble, we need to help them. And this is an amazing example, right? And people keep on saying, "Oh, Islam encourage slavery," and it's not. You can see from all the examples just now from the Bilal, right? Abu Bakr paid a lot of money to free him, Bilal to the master, and now Muhammad SAW raised a lot of money, right? And they did plant all these trees as part of the agreement to free him. So there's a lot of effort on the early Muslims to free the slaves. And this, we must understand this, because the enemies of Islam will always say, Islam is always trying to, you see, you have all these slaves, and it's not, right? It is difficult to eliminate all this completely, but there's always efforts to free the slaves. Okay? Now, so this is how Salman eventually became a Muslim, right? I'm Salman, he said, a son of Islam from the children of Adam, right? And he became known as Salman the Good. Yeah, he was a scholar, and he led a very simple life, or people use aesthetic life, right? In which very simple, not that means he just have one cloak and that which he wore, on which he slept. He's not, even though he came from a rich background, he didn't crave for all this richness, right? And of course, he was famous for the advice that he gave during the Battle of Khandaq, or Battle of the Trench, because in those days, Islam is not just about, jihad, and all this. It's not just that, right? If you know that the enemies were in great numbers, then you need to defend yourself as a neutral, right? So because the enemies, the confederates come from different corners of the peninsula of Arabia in the Battle of Khandaq, the third main battle. So Salman, as person from Persia, right? They used to dig a lot of trenches to defend themselves. So he was the one who suggested, well, you need to defend yourself by digging trenches. Even Abu Sufyan in those days, when they would try to attack Medina, they say, "Oh, what is this?" Right? They have not seen this before in their battles in the land of Arabia. Okay. So this was how he became a scholar, right? Again, through merit, right? And the good thing about Salman al-Farsi was that he had knowledge of three things, right? Of course, of Islam, of Christianity, and of Zoroastrian, right? So he was able to argue and do da'wah in this way. Brothers and sisters, I've always advised you, as I've advised myself, right? And it's very, very serious, right? When you give da'wah to others, Unless you have prior knowledge to the previous books like the Bible and all this, because you were Christian before, or somehow or other you had all this knowledge before, right? For me personally, in order to give da'wah to the people, right, it's better to stick to the Quran completely 100%, right? Is we shouldn't attack the books, especially when we have no knowledge of the books, right? Or we misquote some verses. It makes our position very untenable or very weak, right? We should just emphasize to them about the Quran, the truthfulness about the Quran, right? Whether they accept or not, it's all from Allah, isn't it true, right? So, for example, in the time Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I think Umar ibn Khattab was very happy. Oh, he told Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I found this Torah, the Torah, and he wanted to read that. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was very angry. His face turned red, according to this hadith, right? And he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is enough for you and I to stick to the Quran because the Quran summarizes everything from the previous books, right? So unless you're in the position of Salman al-Farsi, remember, because he did seek knowledge from the priest before, so he got all this knowledge about Christianity, yeah, and of course Zoroastrian, right? Unless you're in that position, then stick to what we know in the Quran. So it's always too good to enjoin good, forbid evil from the truth. Okay. So, and Salman bin Farsi, Rananhu, again, he was a scholar, and he was the first one who translated the Quran to another language. Yeah, so he was the first person who translated the Quran into a foreign language, which is the Persian language. Okay. Now, so this is it, right? Now, the last one, this is a blonde Sahaba, right? Blonde Sahaba, blonde, right? Suhaib ar-Rumi. Yep. For 20 years before the start of the Prophet's mission, there was an Arab called Sinan ibn Malik governed the city of Uballah on behalf of the Persian emperor. Okay. So this Sinan was a father, right? He had many children, right? And he is very rich. He lived in a luxurious palace, right? And as I said, right? Yeah, so he got a blonde hair and all this, Salman al-Farsi, right? And on one day when they were having this picnic, they were attacked by this Byzantine army soldiers, and he was taken and he was sold as a slave, right? And he moved to Constantinople, which is today's modern Turkey, right? And he got this opportunity to get to know the Byzantine Empire and how they run the kingdom and all this and society, right? So Suhaib was quite different from other Sahaba because he grew up learning Greek more than Arab. So he was not fluent in the Arabic language, right? In fact, he forgot the Arabs in the early days because he grew up in Constantinople and all this, right? And as I said, right, that's why he was called Suhaib Arumi, or the Byzantine, because of his peculiar Arabic language and his blonde hair, right? And he became quite rich. And this is why I picked this person to talk about this as a non-Arab. I think it was because of one verse that was revealed because of him, right, in the Quran. Right? I think in Surah number 2 was number 207, right? Now, he became very rich, right? And he, alhamdulillah, right, even then after that, he declared, he was interested in Islam, and he became Islam in the house called, in those days, called Darul Arqam, House of Arqam, right? And he declared, La ilaha illallah, shahadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah, and he became a Muslim, right? And as you know, as in many of these Sahaba and all this in the early stage of Islam, he was also persecuted. Yeah. So on the basis that, so Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as you know, he ordered the people to migrate to Medina, right? So even after, but he couldn't migrate because he wasn't allowed to, because they know that he was very rich, but he was a very good archer, right? And Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam even migrated with Abu Bakr anhu, right, migrated to Medina, and he was desperate to join them, right, in migration, because, as you know, right, if we can't practice Islam properly in a country or in a city, what for? Would you want to stay there? You need to migrate, and there was an order, an obligation to do migration. But of course, he did not migrate because it's not that he did not want to, but he couldn't, right? Because he was prevented by all these Quraysh, right? So in the end, he managed to escape, but the Quraysh managed to get hold of him. Not get hold of him, but try to was surrounding him. And he said, I'm very good in my archery. I can kill all of you very easily. But I'll make a trade, right? At my house, a lot of my treasure is in my house. Go to my house and you get all the treasure. But let me go. So he was one of those Sahaba who sacrificed everything in order, for the sake of Allah, and of course for the sake of Islam, in order to migrate and join Muhammad SAW in Medina. So when he reached Quba, so the Quraysh was saying, well, it's not worth it. We might as well take the treasure, right? So he went, right, and when he reached Quba, Muhammad SAW was receiving him in great smile. And Suhaib ar-Rumi, Suhaib knew, right? The only reason how they knew, remember that in those days there's no telephone, there's no selfie, there's no sending of messages. The only reason how he knew Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam know about this story was through Jibril Alaihi Salam. So indeed a verse was revealed, right, in surah number, I think surah number 2, verse number 207. Right, let's look at it. Surah number 2 in verse number 207. Right, about those who sell themselves for the sake of Allah. Right, so let's look at it. Yeah, وَمِنَ النَّاسِ مَن يَشْرِي نَفْسَهُ ابْتِغَاءَ مَرْضَاتِ اللَّهِ وَاللَّهُ رَءُوفٌ بِالْعِبَادِ. And of mankind is he who would sell himself, seeking the pleasure of Allah, and Allah is full of kindness to his slaves. SubhanAllah. Right, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam knew, right, through Jibril, what he had done in order to migrate to Medina, right? Sacrificing all his wealth. So he came to Medina, as many of the companions did, with nothing. So these are Muhajirin, yeah, they came with nothing at all, right? And this verse was revealed because of him, for Suhaib anhu, right? And eventually, right? Yeah, so he came to Medina with nothing, and of course, right? He became a scholar. He was very generous, even, right? And he got a great sense of humor. So that was the main thing about Suhaib anhu. And another main thing was that during the time of Umar ibn Khattab anhu, when he was a caliph, and he was ill, right? And in between the process of his illness and the selection of another caliph, right, Suhaib anhu was selected to be the imam of the prayer. So this is a great honor. So technically he was the leader, right, that took over Umar ibn Khattab when he was ill, before he passed away, and he became imam for a while to lead the Muslim ummah. Okay, and he died. He lived in Medina for 30 years, and he narrated a few hadith of Prophet ﷺ, right? And he passed away, age over 70, in 658 AD, and was buried in Jannatul Baqi. Yeah, Jannatul Baqi is a grave beside the Prophet's mosque, Masjid Nabawi in Medina, right? So I've chosen three characters, three Sahaba. May Allah be pleased with all of them, right? To show you that Islam does not recognize racism. Islam does not believe that injustice should be done, right, through racism. right? And this is very important, brothers and sisters, right? Living in 2020, right, in a city in London, for example, where we have all a plethora of races in the mosque in this city, right? We need to understand Islam has always, right, advocate justice, equality, and all this, right? And sadly, through my stories, well, racism still exists among the Muslims, right? And we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide those, right, who still think that their race is better than the rest. Right? We are all one ummah, one body, isn't it true? Right? The ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? We should stand united, right? Regardless of our race, right? And we make dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to reward us for our effort in order to eliminate this disease of racism among our ummah, among the Muslims. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to forgive us for any of our shortcomings. Yeah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help our brothers and sisters who are suffering in many parts of the world, in Syria, in Yemen, in Afghanistan, right? In Iraq, right? In Africa, in all parts of the world, with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will continue to guide all of us in a straight path, accept our deeds in the month of Ramadan, and grant all of us with Jannatul Firdaus. I hope today's lesson is helpful, right, to make you understand about racism in among the Muslims, which we hope to eradicate with Allah's will. That Islam completely is against racism, as we talked about in the verses of the Quran and examples of all in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all the Sahaba previously. And we hope that today's lesson will able to enlighten you, inshallah, and I, right, to ensure that we have to try and eradicate this racism among us Muslims. Ya subhanallah wa bihamdika asyhadu an la ilaha illa anta wa astaghfiruka wa atubu ilaik. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursalin walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Jazakumullah khair, and inshallah we'll see you tomorrow for our next lesson.